Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to do a bit of a bookshelf tour and showing you guys all the books that are on my physical TBR, which I actually already went through and wrote them all down so that I could kind of point them out. And I counted them up and I have 32 books on my physical TBR, which is kind of crazy to me because I remember when I first got back into reading and I would only buy books that I was immediately going to read. Like, I didn't really have a physical TBR. I would just go and buy maybe 2 or 3 books, read them, and then go buy more. It wasn't until other people started buying books for me that I actually had a backlog of books on my TBR. And now I'm at the point where a lot of book readers are, where they have a TBR and they have physical books on their shelves that they haven't read, but they keep buying new books. So some of the books that I'm going to be talking about I've had on my shelves for a while, and there's going to be some other books that are brand new. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the bookshelf tour. So, as you can see, we're in my living room. So over in that corner, that's kind of my main bookshelf. And then we've got my desk situation here with another bookshelf on top. And then we've got one more bookshelf over here. So I think I'm actually going to start with this bookshelf here. So this is mostly going to be fantasy books with a couple science fiction in here as well. So I'll start with the top. Up at the top here, I've got books 1 and 2 of the Above the Black trilogy by Mark J. Gregson. That is a sci-fi trilogy. I've only got books 1 and 2 because the third one hasn't come out yet. I think it'll probably come out next year. But I have read and absolutely love those books. They both got 5 stars for me, so I anticipate that book number 3 will also be 5 stars. The shelf below that, I've got the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, of which I've read The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance. I have not yet read Oathbringer or Rhythm of War. So those 2 are still on my physical TBR. Below that, I've got the first 2 books in the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon, both of which I've read, both of which I've absolutely loved, and I will be continuing to purchase the rest of the series eventually. I just haven't gotten to it yet, and that'll probably fill up this entire shelf here. I should mention as well, there is also a 5th book that came out from the Stormlight Archive. I just don't own it yet because I'm waiting for the paperback version to come out, and that'll also go in here. And then the next shelf down here, I've got the Caraval trilogy, which I have read and I absolutely adored. And then I've got the 5th season trilogy, none of which I have read, but it's on, well, obviously it's on my physical TBR, but it's on my priority TBR to at least read the first book. I started reading it, and if you've read it, you know that it's actually in second person perspective, which is a very rare perspective to write in. So it was too much for me at the time when I tried reading it the first time. So I soft DNF'd it, and I know I'll come back to it because I've just heard so many good things. And then I've also got the Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom duology, which I have also read and loved. You'll notice a trend on my bookshelves. I'm probably going to say if I've read them, that I've loved them, because I tend to only keep books that I actually truly enjoyed and that I anticipate myself rereading. If I don't think that I'm going to reread a book, I end up usually getting rid of it, giving it to someone else, taking it to a used bookstore, something like that. I'm not going to keep it on my shelf if I don't see myself rereading it. The next shelf down here, I've got A Little Hatred by Joe Abercrombie, which I have not read yet because I realized after I bought it that it's actually a spin-off series from Joe Abercrombie's first trilogy, which is the First Law trilogy, which I just finished reading the first book from, and that's on this shelf down here. So that one's The Blade Itself. So that one I did just finish reading. So I have to read the other two books in the First Law trilogy first, and then I can go and start A Little Hatred and the rest of the books that are in that spin-off series. And then beside that, I've got The Pariah by Anthony Ryan, which I haven't read. And to be quite frank, I bought it on a total whim. I was at the bookstore one day. I was looking for like kind of a grim, dark fantasy and saw this one, looked it up. It had good reviews. I don't even know if I actually read the like blurb on the back to see what it was about, but I saw that it had good reviews, so I bought it and have not yet read it. So eventually I'll get to that one. Beside that, here I've got the Infernal Devices trilogy here, which is part of the Shadowhunter universe by Cassandra Clare, all of which I have read, out of this trilogy at least. We'll get to the rest of the Shadowhunters world later on, but I've read all 3 books in the Infernal Devices series. Beside that, I've got Powerless and Reckless by Lauren Roberts. I have not bought the last book in the trilogy yet because I read the first 2 books. The first one was good, not like a top tier favorite book, but it was good. I enjoyed it. The second book, honestly, I often forget that I read it because it just, you've probably heard a lot of people say it, but it just has very like middle book syndrome. It just wasn't anything special for me. I didn't really care for it. So I'm just kind of hesitant. I don't know if I'm going to continue that series or not. And then beside that, I've got The Lies of Locke Lamora, which if you watched my spring TBR video, that was one of the books on my TBR for spring. So hopefully I'll get to that one soon. But obviously I haven't read that one yet. It is the first book in, I think, a trilogy called The Gentleman Bastards trilogy series, whatever. I don't know how many books are in it. I'm pretty sure it's just a trilogy. And then beside that, I've got Burnt Offerings by Danielle Devlin, which is a book about witches and like witch trials and stuff. Hence the title Burnt Offerings, I suppose. I have not read that one yet, but it is on my list. My mom bought this book when we all went to Scotland together, and she read it and really enjoyed it, so now I'm borrowing it from her. And then the shelf below that, I already told you about the first book here, which is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. And then I've got Children of Time by, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that author's name. Here, I'll just show you. If you know how to pronounce this author's last name, let me know. Leave a comment with like the phonetic spelling because I would love to know how that's pronounced. But yeah, I've got Children of Time, which is another sci-fi. So like I said, most of these were just fantasy except for the 2 at the top, which were sci-fi. This one is also sci-fi. I have not read it yet, but it sounds super interesting, and I know it had a ton of really good reviews on Goodreads as well. And then the last book on this bookshelf is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which I have read and really, really enjoyed. Loved it. It was great. That's what I've got on this shelf here. There's quite a bit of space still. There's a whole nother shelf down at the very bottom here. And obviously this one only has a few books on it, and they're kind of just like a random assortment of books. There's the one fantasy book and the two sci-fi books down there. Next, I have these two shelves above my desk. These two shelves, at the moment, I've kind of got it set up in a combination of ways. Also, I should mention, all of the books on these shelves, I have read all of them. No books on these shelves are part of my physical TBR. So this shelf here is my Sarah J. Maas shelf. So I've got the ACOTAR series, the Throne of Glass series, and then down at the end I've got the first two books in the Crescent City series. I am waiting to buy the physical version of the third book in the Crescent City series because, if you can tell, these are special editions, both this one and the first one right there. They are the Barnes & Noble exclusive editions, so if you can see, there's no, like, title on the front or anything. It's just the image of Lovely Hunt there, and then it's got the title on the side and everything. And they're just honestly beautiful editions. So I've got the special editions of those for the first one and the second one, and the third one comes out in June, I think. So once that is released, I'll get the matching special edition of the third one. The top shelf here is pretty much the rest of my sort of special edition books. I've got these special editions of the Twilight series. So we've got Twilight, New Moon, Eclipse, Breaking Dawn, Midnight Sun, and the short Second Life of Bree Tanner. I've got all of those. And then beside that, I've got my Fourth Wing books. So I've got the first and third one with the sprayed edges turned out because they're pretty. And I've got Iron Flame faced the other way because the sprayed edges for Iron Flame were just plain black. They didn't have any design to them like the other ones. So, and I actually quite like the dust jacket for Iron Flame. So I have that one with the spine facing out, and then Fourth Wing and Onyx Storm have the sprayed edges facing out. And then beside that, I've got the first three books in the Harry Potter series. So I've got the Philosopher's Stone, Chamber of Secrets, and Prisoner of Azkaban. I have the Mina Lima special editions. So if you know anything about Mina Lima, they did all the, like, they designed all the, like, props and stuff that they used in the movies for the Harry Potter movies. So they came out with illustrated versions of the books, and they're just beautiful. They sadly don't have a contract apparently to do the rest of the series. They only did the first three books, and I don't think they're going to make any more, which is really sad because I wanted to have the entire series in these special editions. And then the last book that I have on the shelf there it's another Mina Lima illustrated book, but it is the Jungle Book. It's not part of the Harry Potter series, obviously. And one thing about me, I absolutely loved the Jungle Book movies growing up. Like, well, I guess now there's movies, but when I was growing up, there was just the one movie. Now they've made, like, live action and everything out of it. But I've just always, that was always one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. And I've never actually read the Jungle book. So Jessie, for Christmas, got me the Mina Lima illustrated version, and I haven't read it yet. So I guess technically that one is on my physical TBR if you want to count it. But it's more, I'll probably read it eventually, but it's more so just kind of the nostalgia aspect of it. I just love having the special edition illustrated version of that one. That's both of those bookshelves. Nothing super exciting, I guess, other than the fact that they're special editions mostly. All right, and then moving over to my beautiful corner bookshelf over here. Starting at the top, I've got, over on this side, I have my Scott's edition of the first Harry Potter book, which I think I showed it at some point in one of my previous vlogs, but it's basically just the first book written in a way that's like kind of phonetically Scottish. Here, let me show you a page because I don't know if this is going to make sense to anyone with me just trying to explain it. But basically, it's written in a way that, like, if you were to read it out loud, the way that the words look like they should be pronounced, it would kind of sound like you have a Scottish accent, if that makes sense. I'll leave that there for a second so you can try to read that. But yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I didn't buy it to read. I just bought it because it's cute. I bought it when I was in Scotland, obviously, because it's the Scots edition, and it's just funny. It's funny to, like, look at and try to read, honestly. So I've got that sitting on, like, a little stand on its own up here. And then over on this side of the shelf, I've got all of my Jessa Hastings books. So I've got the Magnolia Parks and Daisy Hates series. And then I have my hardback edition of Never. And then over here, which, gotta move this little guy. Over here, I've got the Conditions of Will. It's kind of hard to see on camera because it's tucked on the side there, but that's just standing up on its own over here. Also, I should mention, obviously, I've read all of the Jessa Hastings books. None of those are on my TBR. And I've also, if you just saw what I was picking up, I've got these little, like, wooden carvings on the top shelf there. Jesse's Gramps actually carved those. They're, I don't know, I'll show you. Maybe this one. But they're just like little, like, carved men. Little, like, mountain men. I don't know what you would call them, but they're so cute. I just love them. So we put that up here. And also in the back corner here, I've got what looks like a wooden triangle. Because it is a wooden triangle. It's actually my brother and his fiance, I guess. She came up with the idea and he executed it. But if you've ever seen those little, like, book stands where they're just a little triangle and you can put your open book on it to kind of hold your space. So my brother's fiance came up with the idea to gift that to me for Christmas, and my brother actually handmade it. So he built that himself. And then inside there, actually, it's hard to see on camera, but inside there, I just put my little embosser that Jessie got me for Christmas. So that's everything on the top bookshelf there. So then moving down to this shelf here, this is my, actually this shelf and this shelf, these are all my, like, adult thriller / horror books. These books here, this entire side of this shelf, these are all my Stephen King books, which there's only like 2.5, I guess, that I haven't read. I've read all of them except for Salem's Lot and It. And then I've read one of the short stories in If It Bleeds, but there's, I think, 3 or 4 other short stories in that one that I have not read yet. Over here, I've got all of my Riley Sager books, so all of which I have read as well. I think he has a new release coming out in June that Jessie had pre-ordered for me for Christmas, so that'll be on my physical TBR when it arrives next month. And then the next shelf down here are just, again, some more adult thrillers. I've got Murder Road by Simone St. James. That one I have read, quite enjoyed. And then I've got First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. That one was also a really, really good book. I honestly don't remember a ton about it. I just remember it being like very psychologically kind of crazy, if that makes sense. Next to that, I've got Broken Country by Claire Leslie Hall, which I've put that with my other thriller books here because I think it's a thriller. I don't know. I think it's kind of like a cross between a mystery thriller slash fiction. It might be more of a fiction with a mystery aspect or something. I don't know. But I'd put it there because I haven't read it yet, obviously. So once I read it, if I need to move it, if it fits in a different section better, then I'll move it. If you couldn't tell, I like to organize things by genre and author. And then next to that one, I've got Hidden Pictures by, I'm probably going to butcher his last name, but Jason Rekulak. Read that one, enjoyed it. Next, I have The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I don't know how to pronounce that last name either. Obviously, I've read that one. Everyone and their mother has read The Silent Patient, and that was one of the first books that kind of got me into the thriller, psychological thriller genre. Hey, get off my desk. I just had to go cat wrangling, sorry. Anyways, yeah, The Silent Patient. It was great. It got me into loving thrillers. Next to that, I've got 3 books here that are on my physical TBR, so I haven't read them yet. The first one is Tell Me What You Did by Carter Wilson. Honestly, no idea what it's about. Couldn't tell you. I think I saw someone talk about it on maybe Instagram. I couldn't even tell you who I saw talking about it. I just saw it. Someone said that it was decent, and I like thrillers, so we'll see how good it is. I'll let you know, I guess. Next to that, I've got The Truth About the Devlins by Lisa Scottoline? Something like that. Scottoline? All these last names that I can't pronounce. Again, I don't know a ton about it. I have actually not heard anyone talk about it, but I think I had originally just seen it at a bookstore and thought it sounded interesting. It seemed like one of those thrillers that like it's probably not going to be a 5-star read, but it sounds like it's going to be entertaining and like there's going to be a lot of drama. And then next to that, I've got The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, which I have not read yet. Everyone and their mother has either read the book or watched the show. I have not done either. And then next to that, I've got The Crucifix Killer by Chris Carter, which I think was the first book that I finished in the beginning of this year. And it was the first 5-star read that I had this year. It was absolutely a phenomenal thriller. And then I've got 3 books here by Blake Crouch. I've got Recursion, Dark Matter, and Upgrade, all of which I have read, and I am absolutely obsessed with Blake Crouch's writing, honestly. They are more like sci-fi thrillers, so really I could also have them with my other sci-fi books, but they're definitely thriller books. They've just typically got a very like heavy sci-fi element to them, which I find so interesting, honestly. And then below that, I've got 5 books by A.R. Torr. They're all, honestly, A.R. Torr is one of those authors. She also got me kind of into the thriller genre. I would say she's one of those, like, solid 4-star authors for me. Like, her books aren't necessarily masterful works of literature by any means, but they're so entertaining and they're so fast paced and just easy to binge read in one sitting. And like, they're pretty thin books. Like, they're usually around the 300-ish page mark, so you can just read through them so quickly. So I've got A Fatal Affair, The Good Lie, A Familiar Stranger, Every Last Secret, and The Ghostwriter by A.R. Torr. I would say my favorite is probably The Good Lie. And then over here on the other side of that shelf, I've got a few sort of general fiction books. If you can see, there's not a ton on this shelf. There's literally only 4 books over here. So I've got a couple books by Frederick Bachman. I've got A Man Called Ove and Anxious People. And I actually have over on my desk here, I've got Beartown as well by Frederick Bachman, which I literally just started. So I'm just taking it off my physical TBR now. But the other 2 books that I have by him, I have read and quite liked. They were great. They were just like easy reads. They had a little bit of like an emotional element to them, but just good books in general. And then I've also got A Little Life, which we know that this is super trauma heavy. I actually got, I can't even remember. I think I might have gotten a little under halfway through and I decided to soft DNF this book, and I have not picked it up to finish yet. I'm probably going to end up picking it up and just starting it from the beginning because I don't remember anything that was going on. I just know that I have to be in the right headspace before starting that. So I have not done it yet. And then the last book that I've got on my shelf here is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And I'm not gonna lie, I mostly keep this one on my shelf because I absolutely adore the cover of it. But truthfully, the story itself did not blow me away. Ooh, I know that's an unpopular opinion. I know a lot of people love that book so much. And I enjoyed it. Like, it was a good book. I just, like, I don't know. I didn't relate to any of the characters as much as I think other people did. I think I gave it 3 stars, maybe. And if it weren't for the cover, I probably would have unhauled it at some point. I've got a little friend here because he just can't be anywhere other than on my lap. So he's going to help me explain the last 2 shelves down here on this bookshelf. Maybe, if I can get him settled. You might also be able to hear his purring, so sorry. So the last couple shelves here on this bookshelf, I've got this side of the shelf here, which is all of my YA books. So the majority of them from here over is all Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So I've got all of the books that are currently out in the Inheritance Games series. I've got the original trilogy and then all 2 of the books that are out. Actually, I think I've got the Grandest Game. I think there's another one that might have already released, but I haven't gotten it yet. Either that or it's releasing soon. But there is one other book in the like kind of spin-off series, I guess, that I haven't read yet. But other than that, I've read all of the books on this shelf, actually. So I've read all of the Inheritance Games books, as well as the Brothers Hawthorne and The Grandest Game, which are two of the kind of like spin-off series books. And then I've got the Naturals series. So I've got The Naturals, Killer Instinct, All In, and Bad Blood, which is her other YA series that's super popular. And I absolutely adored it. If you've heard anything about those books, you would probably know that most people refer to them as like a YA Criminal Minds sort of thing, where these kids are just like prodigies and they're really good at helping the FBI identify criminals and catch criminals and stuff. So I've read all of those books, and then next to that I've got Five Survive down at the bottom here by Holly Jackson. And then I've got the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins. And then I've got The Grace Year by Kim Liggett, I think is how you pronounce her last name. And then I've got Anatomy and Immortality, which they're kind of, I would say they're more maybe new adult versus young adult. Like, they're not about young adults necessarily, but there's nothing like the content, I would say, isn't. Hello. Hello, sweetie. Oh, I know. I wouldn't say the content in the books is necessarily too adult. Like, I would say young adults could probably read those books. And then the last one that I've got here is Lie or Die by A.J. Clack. And that one was, I wouldn't say it was an amazing work of art necessarily either, but it was super entertaining. And then over on this side, I've got my nonfiction books. So I've got Beyond the Wand by Tom Felton, which I have read and loved. I've got Educated by Tara Westover, which I have not read yet, but I would like to get to it soon. I've got Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert, which I've read and loved. I've got the Unabridged Journals of Sylvia Plath, which I've read a little bit of, but it's journal entries, so it's not like a book that you would just like sit and read from start to end. I kind of just pick it up whenever and read bits and pieces of it. I've also got The Pivot Year by Brianna Weist, which also is like it's supposed to be one of those books where you read a page every day for a year. So there's 365 like entries. So I just kind of read it whenever I feel like it. And then over on the side here, which you probably can't see at all, I've got the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins and Dinner for Vampires by Bethany Joy Lenz, which, if you don't know who that is, go and watch One Tree Hill, because she is one of the best characters on that show, to be honest. But it's basically her memoir about kind of being on a cult TV show like One Tree Hill, but also behind the scenes, she was actually part of a real cult. So super interesting. I absolutely loved reading that. I listened to the audiobook while reading it, which is narrated by her. So it's very good. I would highly recommend it if you're into reading memoirs. And then the last shelf that I've got down at the bottom here, over on the side, I've got mostly like historical fiction. So I've got Sarah's Key, The Beekeeper of Aleppo, All the Light We Cannot See, The Kite Runner, and The Nightingale. All of which I have read, all of which I quite enjoyed. I used to really, really, really love reading historical fiction. I don't read a ton of it anymore, but every time I pick up a historical fiction book, I tend to like it. So I don't really know why I don't read a ton of it anymore. I think I just gravitate to other books as priorities. And then on the other side of the shelf down here, these are all my romance books, which a lot of people would be surprised that it's kind of down in sort of a hidden part of my bookshelf, because most people would say that romance is their like biggest genre on their bookshelves. But as you can see, I would say mine is probably like thrillers. Again, I used to read a ton of romance books, but I have just found myself not really caring for them all that much unless one of my like favorite romance authors releases a new book, I'll go and buy their books, but really there's not that many just kind of like random romance books that I read and absolutely love. So I've kind of just stopped prioritizing them. But the ones that I have on my bookshelf, and these are obviously all of the ones that I've decided to keep, I've got The Paper Palace by Miranda Cowley Heller, which I read so long ago, and I would love to do a reread of it sometime soon because it was such a 5-star read for me. It was just such a good book. I highly recommend going and reading that one. And then I've got One Italian Summer by Rebecca Surley. Again, another just phenomenal 5-star book. I would say it borders on like romance and women's fiction, but it was just, I was bawling my eyes out by the end of it. And then I've actually only got a couple of my Emily Henry books down here, but I own all of Emily Henry's books so far except for her newest release because I'm waiting for the paperback to come out, which will probably be next year. But on my shelf currently, I have Funny Story and Beach Read. The other Emily Henry books that I own are actually up at my parents' place. And then next to that, I've got 3 books by Ali Hazelwood. I've got The Love Hypothesis, Love on the Brain, and Love Theoretically, which I would say I absolutely loved The Love Hypothesis. And then my interest in Ali Hazelwood's books just kind of dwindled the more I read. So, like, I enjoyed Love on the Brain, but not quite as much as Love Hypothesis. And then I enjoyed Love Theoretically, but not as much as Love on the Brain. And then I just haven't read any of her other books because they kind of just all feel the same to me, to be honest. And then next to that, I've got Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren, which is just a fan favorite. Everybody loves that book. And then I've got my Abby Jimenez books. So I've got Say Remember Me, which is the only one on this shelf that I have not yet read because I'm saving it for a sunny day. And then I've got Just for the Summer, Part of Your World, and Yours Truly. And then I've got the first 2 books in the Knock 'Em Out trilogy. I've got Things We Never Got Over and Things We Hide from the Light. And I never bought the third one in that trilogy because I absolutely loved the first one. The second one was just kind of meh for me, and I didn't really hear great things about the third one, so I just never ended up buying it, and I probably won't ever buy it. And then I've got Out of Love and Better by Far by Hazel Hayes, and those are also just amazing books. Hazel Hayes writes really good emotional romance books. I would almost argue that they're less romance and maybe more women's fiction, but to each their own, really. And then I've got kind of a bit of a random one. It's not really a romance book, but I've got 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which, again, another fan favorite, just a wonderful book. I think I actually only gave it maybe a 4-star when I originally read it years and years ago, but I would probably change my rating to be 5 stars at this point because I think about this book all the time. That is it for all of my bookshelves that are in the living room here. I have one other bookshelf that I want to show you, but it is in my bedroom. So let's head over there. All right, so these are the last two shelves that I have to show you. So we'll start with this shelf down here first. Over here, I've got the 6 books in the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare. So these are all, again, part of the Shadowhunters universe. All of these I have read except for the 6th one, City of Heavenly Fire, because I've been reading the books in the universe in publication order. So I think I read the first 3 books in the Mortal Instruments, and then I kind of went back and forth between the Infernal Devices and City of Fallen Angels, Infernal Devices, City of Lost Soul, Infernal Devices, and then I actually read the Bane Chronicles. And now the next book that I have to read is City of Heavenly Fire. And then the rest of the books in the Shadowhunter universe I have not read yet, but I also don't own any of the rest of them, so eventually I'll get to those. But other than that, I've read all of these books except for the last one. And then I've got a few more Brandon Sanderson books here. I've got the Mistborn trilogy, so that's The Final Empire, The Well of Ascension, and The Hero of Ages. These ones might look a little bit different than maybe the editions that you've seen because these are actually the UK editions. I got the UK editions because I just like them more. Really, there's no other reason. I just like the white covers and I think they're beautiful. And then on top here, I've got a standalone book from Brandon Sanderson. That one is Warbreaker. And then over here, I've got, again, some more, ironically, white books that are also the UK editions. That just worked out conveniently. I didn't do it on purpose. But I've got the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang. So the Poppy War, the Dragon Republic, and the Burning God. All of those I have read, absolutely loved. Again, I should mention the Brandon Sanderson books. I have read them all, absolutely loved them. And then one random standalone book at the very end here. This is Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr, which, if you remember one of the other books on my historical fiction shelf in the living room, All the Light We Cannot See. That's the same author as Cloud Cuckoo Land. This one was also quite a good book, but I, like, gun to my head, couldn't tell you what it was about. I just remember it being good. And then up here, we've got the entirety of the Boys of Tommen series, none of which I've read. Actually, I should say this entire bookshelf, I have not read any of these books because this actually used to be my original like TBR shelf. This is where I used to keep all of the books on my physical TBR. And then I just eventually had too many books on my TBR, so I started just putting them where they belonged on my bookshelf, depending on their genre or their author. But yeah, I have not read any of the Boys of Tommen books, but I've got all of them here so far. There's actually a 6th one that is coming out at the end of the month in May here, so I already have that pre-ordered, so there will be another one added to this stack when that arrives. And then over here, I've got down at the bottom, The Lovely War by Julie Berry, The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown, End of Story by A.J. Finn, Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber, Dishonestly Yours by Krista and Becca Ritchie, and The Ghost Woods by C.J. Cook. And on top of that, I've got my cutie little Maui turtle. He's so cute. Look at him. He's so sweet. It says on the bottom, Maui 18. If it'll focus, there we go. It says Maui 18 on the bottom because Jesse and I actually bought this little guy when we were in Maui for our honeymoon back in 2018. When the world was just a simpler place. But I have him just sitting, watching all of these books on my TBR. He's taking care of them for me. But yeah, that is my bookshelf tour and all of the books that I have either read or not read. If you guys have read any of the books that I've mentioned, whether I've read them or not, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought about them, and let's have some book talks. You know what I mean? Let's talk about books. Other than that, this is the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.